Hi, this is Walter Weesey with Yellowstone Country Fly Fishing, and this is my weekly Montana Guide Flies fly tying video. And I'm going to break my own rules a little bit here because I actually have not guided with this fly at all, but I've fished it personally just recently and just knocking them dead on it. And as much as anything, I want to show off this wing style. This fly is a big one. I'm going to tie a 12 just for demonstration purposes, but I've been fishing these in 18s up in Yellowstone Park as a blue-winged olive and just knocking them dead on it. Very few refusals, and those have been situations where I was dragging the fly and kind of deserved it and so on. And I mean, let me put it this way. I had a strike on my first cast I ever made with this fly. And it's using Charlie Craven's Timmy wing style, which you can see here. It's both a looped wing and kind of a spinner style wing. And but it makes it on a much more kind of a delicate sort of fly. His versions of this fly are kind of bushy, nasty, a lot more stuff going on. And I wanted it to be a blue-wing olive, and I like my blue-wing olives to be slender. And I've been looking for years actually for what I would call a windshield fly. It looks like something that you scrape off your windshield, and smack a mosquito. Just crush a mayfly. Although you shouldn't do that. You should feed it to the fish instead. And it's going to be a lot of wing and then a slender body. It's actually not going to be that messy in the body area. I actually want to try this wing style on caddis as well, and those should be messy, but on these mayflies I want them skinny. And cool thing about this fly is that it'll tie from 10, this is a 12, but easily a 10, maybe even an 8, all the way down to at least 22, maybe even 24, with very, very little modification. I mean, thread size and the amount of material you use, and that's it. And when I was tying these in 18s for actual use, the only things I changed were the thread color, the thread size, and just the amount of the materials. And believe it or not, this one, the 12 here, is actually tied with, I tied it with 3/0 and monocord thread, and I still managed to make it that thin. And so, like I said, it'll scale really, really well. If you're looking for a pattern to try tying really small, either as a mayfly or as a midge, I think this would be a really, really good one. And I am looking forward to tying this in a whole bunch of different colors. I think a black one would work great in the winter as a midge, maybe delete the tail. Tie them fuzzy, I think it would work as a caddis, kind of a spent caddis, and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to go through and show you how I tie it. All right, my hook in the vise here is a size 12 1x short emerger hook. So it looks kind of like a scud hook, but it's not quite as much curvature to it, and then a straight eye. And if I didn't have that hook, I would be using just a standard dry fly hook, but a 1x short dry fly hook. So that would be it shows you how long I've been tying. It would be a Mustad 94-836 rather than a 94-840. And that would allow me to go back down into the bend here while kind of still maintaining that same size fly. I'm going to be using 2 threads here. This one is going to be like a gray monocord. I'm not even sure what this is because the label came off of it. And then my second thread, which is going to be a rib, and then actually the tying thread for the front of the fly, is this Montana Fly Company olive in 3/0. Now, if I was actually tying this in an actual correct blue-wing olive size, I'd be using rusty dun as my gray thread, and then olive dun as my kind of secondary thread, both in 8/0. And the smaller you get, the smaller the threads you get. If I was actually tying a size 12 of this kind of style of fly, I would probably wind up doing 6/0 and then using like a buoyant or something for the body. But since this is kind of standing in for an 18, I'm going to tie it with thread like I would on the 18. But anyhow, I'm going to start my gray thread here up towards the eye. And then I'm immediately going to tie in the bobbin with my 3/0 olive thread. And I fiddled with this a little bit when I was first tying this pattern, and I make it sound like I've been tying it for months. I started tying it last week. But I'm going to wrap well down the bend here, and then just let that olive bobbin hang. And then I'm going to advance my thread kind of most of the way back up to that shank there. And then my tails on this fly are going to be that same stuff I used last week, actually, like a medium or dark Pardo, Cote de Leon here. And on a 18, I'm using 5 fibers, but on this one, I'm just kind of grabbing a, appropriately sized clump. And I do tend to like pretty robust tails on my mayflies. You see a lot of mayflies tied with 3 fibers of Cote de Leon as a tail, and it's kind of like, why bother? Because I don't think the fish are counting them, and then having a widely splayed tail also functions really well as essentially outriggers for the fly. I also, for that reason, like to tie my tails very, very long. So you see here, the shank length, which is usually what you're going to see, is about there. I'm going to come in. I'm actually tying that longer than shank length. I'm going to tie that in on the top of the hook shank just with a couple wraps back towards the bend there. And you see there how that's angled downward, and I'm going to fix that momentarily here. In fact, I'm going to stand that up right now and just take one turn just behind those tails to kind of cock them up a little bit, and then go ahead and wrap over the butts up to the eye, up not to the eye, but to the tie-off point for that body there. And then if you like, you can make a slight taper here. I was definitely doing this on the 18s. I wasn't doing it with the gray thread on that sample fly. And in hindsight, I don't think I should have done it there because this thread really is too thick. But you can kind of see, that's all I'm going to do to make any kind of a taper on this fly. It's just a little bit of thread, maybe not even make it level. But then I'm going to tie that off and then just kind of a 2 or 3 turn whip finish there because I'm going to be going over it again with other thread. And then the rest of this fly is going to be tied with this olive dun. And I'm going to take this and then I'm just going to rib this up that hook shank, just kind of darken that gray thread a little bit. Because like I said, our blueing olives here are kind of gray olive. And so having sort of that little bit of tinge of olive rather than just being either straight olive or straight gray is going to be kind of the coloration I'm going to look for. And actually, and just kind of looking at this one, this is that rusty dun thread. That's going to wind up coming out a little darker than this gray thread I just happened to use on this larger version. So I'd be using, again, even if I was using a thread body on this size 12, and actually meaning it rather than just showing you how easy it is to make a slender body with this thing, I would probably be using 6/0 thread. I just wanted to use that monocord to kind of keep the proportions similar to what they would be if you were actually tying an 18. But anyhow, my wing on this fly is going to be, and there's a lot of wings going on this fly. This is the most interesting part of this, and you can thank Charlie Craven for that. Anyhow, this is Silver Montana Fly Company Widow's Web, and you can use whatever fiber you want here as long as it's a hot dyed poly yarn. Charlie Craven uses EP fiber, same thing. It's exactly the same fiber, it's just a different dye job. You could use macrame yarn. And, I'd probably be using 2/3 this much on an 18. In fact, this clump I have here, it's the end of the clump I was using to tie. I think I tied 2 18s, 1 12, and now one more 12 with it. And I was using, I was just pulling out a few extra fibers to get it to the thickness I wanted when I was tying those 18s. But I'm going to tie this in here, kind of starting at the front end of that body, and going to wrap forward about halfway to the eye from the end of that body. I'm going to leave both ends hang here. I'm going to leave that back end long. I'm going to leave the front end long. Now, the way Charlie Craven ties his is he starts dubbing the thorax right now, and then just uses dubbing to split the wing. I don't like doing that. I like actually splitting it. So I'm going to come in here and get more or less half and half, either side of the hook shank there, just like you would on a spinner. And then just want to get a few more over there. I tend to be a lot more fussy about this than you have to be. But anyhow, split it like you would a spinner, and then I'm going to come in and make X wraps to secure that. And I think the reason I like to do this is I definitely want those down perpendicular to the hook shank. I don't want them angled up at all. I want them, to sit in the water. And that's going to do that, because I have those, I think, down more on the sides of the hook shank than Charlie does when he ties the thing. But anyway, I'm going to make a few wraps in front there to bind that in. And then my thorax on this fly is going to be super fine dry fly dubbing in gray olive. And realistically, if I was tying an actual 12 rather than a 12 standing in for an 18, I would use probably hare's ear dubbing, hairline dubbing, rabbit dubbing. Maybe pull a few of those guard hairs out, but otherwise have it be a little fuzzier than this because, the super fine is extremely fine dubbing. And so I'm going to have a lot of it to build up the bulk here. Whereas something that's a little coarser is going to be a little easier to build up that necessary bulk. But again, I'm just trying to demonstrate how I'd be tying an 18. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and make a couple X wraps actually around that wing, that front wing, I should say, just like you would on a spinner. And I'm going to make a couple turns back, and then forward again, and maybe a couple more X wraps, and then a wrap or two just right in front. Actually, it's more than a wrap or two, but if I was tying an 18, it would have been a wrap or two. All right, and then I'm going to take kind of the final step here on this fly. I'm going to take that back tuft of the wing here and fold that over the top, like so. And then I'm going to take my other hand and fold those spinner type wings back. And then I'm going to hold those out of the way with my left hand. I'm going to take my right hand, and then I'm going to push backwards to kind of make a bubble here. And then I'm going to come in with my bobbin, just make a couple turns, 3 turns there, and then I'm going to get my whip finisher here, and then whip finish, just do a normal whip finish right in front of that wing butt to kind of stand that up a little bit and clear the eye so you can actually tie your fly on, and then clip my thread. That's it. Very simple fly. Like I said, this is actually, it's just as easy to tie it in an 18 as it is in a 12. And I'm pretty sure I could tie it down to a 24, and I don't tie 24s very often. But kind of remaining steps here are going to be to trim my wing butts here. And Charlie trims them all together. I don't like doing that. I actually like trimming them separately. So I'm going to take those down wings, and then I inverted the hook here, and I'm pulling those straight up. And I'm going to trim those like so. And then invert it again, or revert it, I should say. And then now I'm going to trim my front wing butt. And then I like to look here, and I don't really care too much about that front wing, but I actually like the down wings, on all of my down wings actually, to be a little shorter at the back end. Because if you actually look at a mayfly, they do have 4 wings, and the rear wings are shorter. And so that kind of looks like that. And that also, those shorter fibers are also stiffer. It's like when you have a buzz cut, it feels stiffer. And so that's going to keep those from collapsing once the fly gets wet. But anyhow, there it is. That's I'm calling this a Skinny Timmy, and or a Tiny Tim. I don't even really have a name for it yet. I think Skinny Timmy sounds better, but Tiny Tim obviously has got some ring to it. And that's how I'm using the Timmy wing style that Charlie Craven came up with. And like I said, it's been just an absolute winner up for me in Yellowstone Park. In fact, I haven't actually fished this fly on a standard fly rod yet. I actually carry a 10-foot 10-inch Tenkara rod that breaks down small enough to fit in a jacket pocket. I carry that when I'm fishing for fall run brown trout. I have my nymph rod or my streamer rod, and then if I see risers, I set that down, break out this Tenkara rod. And even with that limitation, not being able to cast all that far and so on, very, very few refusals. I mean, I've hooked or landed most of the fish that I've cast this fly at. And again, in a size 18, but it'll scale really, really well. I mean, you can see even that with a thread body and a 12 looks pretty good. And I think it would look fantastic if it was a buyout body. So I really suggest, especially this wing style, but even this pattern, scale it down into size 18 for an actual blue wing olive pattern, 18 or 20, and I think you're going to knock them dead on it. As always, thanks for watching, and if you find this video helpful or any of my other content helpful, I'd appreciate it if you'd buy me a coffee using the link below. It's basically a tip jar. Thanks, and see you next week.